At the United Nations headquarters in New York, a tense session of the Security Council unfolded on September 26, 2025, as world powers debated the future of sanctions on Iran's nuclear program. The debate came just hours after the UN nuclear watchdog confirmed that inspections of Iranian atomic sites had resumed, an apparent sign of progress that nonetheless failed to halt the political clash. The meeting opened under the gavel of Hwang Jun-kook, the president of the UN Security Council for September. Seated around the horseshoe-shaped table were ambassadors and senior envoys from the world's leading powers. The Council was considering a resolution proposed by Russia and China to extend the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran by 6 months, an effort aimed at delaying the automatic reimposition of sanctions. That resolution was ultimately rejected, setting the stage for sharp exchanges among the diplomats. The spotlight soon turned to Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, who delivered a strongly worded speech. His tone was defiant, underscoring Tehran's long-standing position that it would not bow to pressure. Araghchi declared, just as military attacks have failed to reach any of their declared objectives, the so-called snapback mechanism will fail too. The only solution is dialogue. The JCPOA proves this. Iran will never respond to threats or pressure. We respond only to respect. Today's decision has obliterated whatever remaining trust of the Iranian people in the promises of the US. Araghchi accused the Council's Western members of undermining the fragile trust that had been built during the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, the nuclear accord that placed limits on Iran's program in exchange for sanctions relief. He insisted that the failure to sustain dialogue risked undoing years of painstaking diplomacy. Responding to criticism from the French delegation, Araghchi dismissed claims that international inspectors were absent from Iran's nuclear facilities. He said, in response to what the French representative said, the Russian colleague said what it should be said. Only 1 or 2 points. He claimed that the agency's inspectors are not in Iran, but this is absolutely wrong. They are now in Iran inspecting our nuclear facilities, according to the agreement I made with Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, signed in Cairo. There is a procedure for this. His remarks underscored Iran's effort to portray itself as a cooperative partner with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, even as political pressure mounted over its uranium enrichment activities. Moscow, a key player in the original 2015 deal, joined Beijing in trying to stave off the return of sanctions. Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, dismissed the Western move to trigger the so-called snapback mechanism, an automatic reimposition of punitive measures, arguing it had no legal basis. Polyansky told the Council, Mr. President, turning now to the statement delivered by the UK and France about their alleged triggering of the snapback, we categorically reject them as invalid, and we repeatedly set out our arguments in detail, specifically in the joint letter from the foreign ministers of Russia, China and the US. His intervention signalled Moscow's unwillingness to go along with sanctions enforcement despite the obligations of international law. Russia also hinted it might not implement the measures, raising further questions about the unity of the Security Council. France's ambassador to the UN, Jérôme Bonnafont, expressed deep frustration at Iran's approach. Speaking in English, he lamented that Tehran had failed to make even minimal concessions to avoid the crisis. Bonnafont said all avenues for an agreement were explored with the Iranian delegation. With great regret, Iran persisted in its refusal. We were expecting concrete and specific gestures, but Iran made no concrete or specific gesture. We sought an immediate agreement, but Iran preferred to defer to later negotiations. His remarks highlighted the growing exasperation among European powers who had long tried to keep the JCPOA alive despite Washington's withdrawal in 2018 under then-President Donald Trump. Representing Washington at the session, Dorothy Shea, the US Deputy Ambassador to the UN, stressed that the reimposed sanctions were targeted and did not foreclose future diplomacy. Yet she was unequivocal about the need to act against what she described as Tehran's continuing breaches of nuclear commitments. Shea told the Council, those measures are narrowly scoped to address the threat posed by Iran's nuclear, missile and conventional arms programs and support for terrorism. And the snapback of these measures does not preclude removal through diplomacy. But at this stage, there is no basis for changing course. Despite suggestions to the contrary, Iran has still failed to address E3 concerns regarding its highly enriched uranium stockpile, compliance with its IAEA obligations. The US stance underscored the Biden administration's balancing act, keeping the door open for talks while insisting on accountability for what it sees as Iran's provocative nuclear steps. Throughout the meeting, the divide among the Security Council's permanent members was clear. On one side were the Western powers, the US, the UK and France, pushing for the snapback sanctions. On the other were Russia and China, calling for restraint and more time for diplomacy. The presence of the IAEA inspectors in Iran, confirmed by both Tehran and the agency itself, did little to ease the tensions. While it suggested some level of technical cooperation, it was not enough to bridge the political gulf over how to respond to Iran's enrichment of uranium and its compliance record. The rejection of the Russia-China proposal to delay the sanctions marked a pivotal moment. It demonstrated the Council's failure to achieve consensus and reinforced perceptions that the global order on nuclear non-proliferation is fragmenting. Iran's central message, voiced repeatedly by Araghchi, was that external pressure and threats would not compel Tehran to change its course. Instead, he argued, respect and constructive engagement were the only viable paths to resolving the nuclear dispute. By stressing that the JCPOA itself had proven the efficacy of dialogue, Araghchi sought to remind the world that diplomacy had once worked. But his lament over the loss of Iranian public trust in US commitments hinted at the domestic political challenges facing Tehran in returning to any negotiated accord. Behind the immediate debate over sanctions lay deeper geopolitical currents. Russia's refusal to fully endorse the sanctions reflected its increasingly strained relations with the West and its closer ties with Tehran. China, too, has grown more aligned with Iran, particularly in energy and infrastructure cooperation. The US and its European allies, meanwhile, remain concerned about Iran's support for militant groups in the region, its missile program, and what they describe as destabilizing activities across the Middle East. The meeting closed without a breakthrough. As the sanctions look set to snap back into place, questions linger about how strictly they will be enforced, particularly by Russia and some other countries with economic ties to Tehran. Diplomats leaving the chamber acknowledged the stalemate but emphasized the need to keep channels of communication open. The IAEA's ongoing inspections could serve as a thin lifeline for future talks, even as political tensions continue to mount. For now, Iran remains defiant, the Western powers resolute, and the Security Council divided, a familiar tableau in the long-running saga of Tehran's nuclear program. The events in New York served as a stark reminder that even with inspectors back on the ground in Iran, the path to renewed diplomacy remains fraught with mistrust and geopolitical rivalries.